Hi, 7th grade. This video is going to continue our understanding of inferencing with an emphasis on selecting best evidence to support inferences. That seemed to be a struggle on the last interim, and you have another interim coming up in early December, so we want to continue to practice those skills. Again, the emphasis is on identifying evidence to support inferencing. So I have two passages. This video will be, I'm not sure exactly how long it's going to be, but it's going to be a little longer one because it does take time to deconstruct the assessment and also the text. Okay. This passage is called the art room. So pay attention to what I do with the document. Julian had been avoiding Mr. Chen's art room for 3 weeks straight. So here I might wonder why. Why is he avoiding a particular space, right? So always, when you start reading, always start thinking of those questions. Every Tuesday and Thursday, when his schedule said art in room 204, he finds somewhere else to be. The library, this thing really bugs me. The library, claiming research, the bathroom, taking his time. Once, even the principal's office, where he'd volunteered to help organize the lost and found. So again, I'm wondering why he's doing this. So here I'm going to just write in parentheses why is he avoiding this space? Does he struggle with is he struggling with arts? Does he feel something negative about it? Okay, so this is my note. Why is he avoiding art? You know, he's going to catch you eventually, his cousin Terrell said, shoving books into his locker between second and third period. Mr. Chen isn't stupid. He knows you're ditching. For those of you guys who don't know what ditching is, that's when you avoid a certain space, when you find another space to be at. So it sounds like Terrell's trying to be the one that has more common sense in this case, asking him why is he, that eventually he's going to get caught. Julian shrugged, trying to look unconcerned. I just don't see the point. I can't draw. My stick figures look like they got hit by trucks. Why should I sit there and embarrass myself twice a week? So he sounds like he is not very comfortable with his arts. He doesn't feel successful. He doesn't feel successful with his art. He doesn't feel like he can do anything in there, so he wants to avoid it. Okay, so what kind of person is he? Sounds like he's a little insecure, maybe. Because it's required, Terrell offered, raising an eyebrow, because you need to pass 7th grade. Also, these kids are in 7th grade. And he doesn't like to go to arts because he doesn't feel like he can do a good job in there. Okay, let's keep going. What Terrell didn't know, so Terrell's the cousin, I believe, right? Yeah, his cousin. What Terrell didn't know, what Julian hadn't told anyone, was that it wasn't really about the drawing. Oh, interesting. I wonder what is the other problem then. Julian's older brother, Dev, had been the art star of the family. Dev could sketch anything, portraits that looked like photographs, landscapes that seemed to have more to move, abstract pieces that made people stop and stare. Everyone always said Julian must have inherited the same talents. Teachers would light up when they saw his last name on the roster. Oh, another Rodriguez. Your brother was so gifted. So I hope you guys are understanding this. So Julian has an older brother who is an amazing artist. And Julian feels like he cannot live up to that same reputation. So he feels like he can't, first of all, he can't draw, and his brother's an amazing artist. So he has a certain reputation to uphold. People are expecting him to be good at art, but he's not. And that makes him feel awful. And that's why he doesn't like to go to art. Let's keep going. But Julian wasn't Dev. Dev is his brother. And he was tired of the disappointment that flickered across people's faces when they realized it. So when people realize that he can't draw, they show it in their face, right? They're able to like show their disappointment. He doesn't like that. He feels like a failure. Hope you guys understand that. On Thursday, Julian's luck ran out. Mr. Chen was standing outside the library, arms crossed, waiting. Ooh, you've seen that look. He wasn't angry. His expression was calm, almost amused, but he gestured towards the art room with a finality that said the conversation was over before it started. So he's like pointing to the art room, like, you know where you belong, big boy. Inside, the class was already working. Julian noticed immediately that nobody was painting masterpieces. No what? Nobody's like doing amazing work like his brother. It sounds like his brother was just very gifted, right? He's very gifted, and no one else is like him. Sarah Chen was gluing together what looked like cardboard catastrophe. Oh my God. James Foster's sculpture resembled a lumpy potato. Lord have mercy. Even Anna Martinez, who everyone knew was talented, had paint smeared across her cheeks and looked frustrated. So it looks like everybody's struggling. Maybe this will make him feel a little better. Sit, Mr. Chen said, pointing to an empty stool. He placed a block of gray clay in front of Julian. Make something that matters to you. Doesn't have to be pretty, doesn't have to look like anything I recognize, just has to be honest. Julian stared at the clay. His hands moved before his brain caught up, pressing and pulling, creating something that wasn't quite a shape, but wasn't quite formless either. It was rough and uneven, full of thumbprints, marks, and crooked edges. When Mr. Chen came by 20 minutes later, he studied it for a long moment. Tell me more about it, he said. Sounds like Mr. Chen is a pretty calm guy. I hate this little flicker, guys. I don't know, Julian started. Then he stopped. He thought about Dev's perfect sketches, so he's thinking about his brother again, about everyone's expectations, about how he'd been hiding. I guess it's about trying to be something you're not, about how that feels all jagged and wrong. Mr. Chen nodded slowly. That, he said, is art. Not because it's beautiful, but because it's true. He paused, meeting Julian's eyes. Your brother made beautiful things, but you're not your brother. You don't have to be. As class ended, students filed out. Julian stayed behind, turning his rough clay pieces over in his hands. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't even particularly good, but for the first time in weeks, the tight feeling in his chest had loosened, so he's feeling a little better. Maybe art wasn't about being talented, maybe it was about being brave enough to show up. Tara was waiting outside. Tara was a cousin, remember? So, how bad was it? Julian looked down at the clay piece in his hand, then back at his cousin. Actually, he said, surprised to find he meant it. It wasn't bad at all. So let's look at some of these questions, okay? The art room. Let me move this. I hope that that makes sense, okay? What inference about Julian and Taro is best supported by the text? So what is the inference that is best supported by this text? Let's look at some of these. Julian is jealous of his cousin's talent, but Taro doesn't notice Julian's resentment. No, he's not jealous of his cousin. His cousin's the one that's telling him to go into art because he needs to pass 7th grade. If anything, he might be jealous of his brother, but that's not what A says. Julian cares deeply about school while Taro is mostly focused on social activities. That doesn't, no. Julian is the one that's ditching arts, and Taro's the one telling him to go into arts because he's gonna not pass. So that's wrong. C, while Julian is artistic and creative, Taro prefers sports. Nowhere does it say this. There is no evidence for that. It doesn't even say Julian is not artistic at all or creative. He's not like his brother. So that just leaves D. Julian avoids confronting his problems directly, right? He avoids going to arts. He's ditching, he's going to the library, he goes to the office. But Taro is more straightforward and practical about challenges. Taro's like, you gotta just go in there, buddy, get it done. So this is a pretty easy question, right? Because the incorrect answers are very incorrect. And this one is the correct one, right? He's avoiding going into, he's avoiding his problems. And Taro's like, you gotta just do it. Let's look at 2. Which of the following inferences about Julian is supported by the text? So think about Julian, right? What kind of person is Julian? He's the one that has a brother that's older than him, that's a good artist. Julian sounds like he's a little insecure. He wants to live up to his brother's name. He avoids spaces. Which of the following inferences about Julian is best supported by the text? So let's look at some of these. Let's work our way back. Julian is failing most of his classes and doesn't care about school. No, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say that. You can infer that maybe that's true because he's avoiding these spaces, but it talks mainly about art. So it never says that he's failing most of his classes. He might be failing arts because he doesn't go to it. Julian has no artistic ability whatsoever. At the beginning, you might make that inference, but towards the end, you shouldn't because he does have some sort of artistic ability with the clay. Okay, so you can't make that assumption. B. Julian dislikes Mr. Chen. No, he doesn't dislike Mr. Chen. He dislikes going to arts, which is different, right? It doesn't. You can't assume that he dislikes the teacher. He doesn't dislike the teacher. He actually says the teacher's pretty calm. And then this one, Julian is embarrassed about living in his brother's shadow. Yes. Some of you guys might not understand what that means, but that means that his brother has a reputation for being an amazing artist, and here he is not being an amazing artist. So the answer is A. 3. Which detail from the text best supports your answer? So which of these supports that Julian is embarrassed about living in his brother's shadows? Let's look at the responses. He placed a block of gray clay in front of Julian. Make something that matters to you. This doesn't focus on anything to do with the brother. Let's look at B. Everyone always said Julian must have inherited the same talents. Teachers would light up when they saw the last name on the roster. Yes, this one is the correct answer because this one shows you that he feels like everybody has an assumption of him, that everybody expects him to be an amazing artist because of his brother. This one, Julian has been avoiding Mr. Chen's art room for 3 weeks. It doesn't talk about the brother at all. No. My stick figures look like they got hit by trucks. Why should I sit there and embarrass myself? This has nothing to do with the brother either. Number 4. Which statement best describes the theme of the art room? So the theme is what can you learn from this? What is the learning lesson? What is the lesson that you're gonna learn from this story? Maybe that you should give yourself a little bit of credit, maybe, right? Maybe that you should not compare yourself to others. You have your own skills that you can bring into the table. Let's look at some of the answers. So what is the theme? Teachers should never compare students to their siblings. That's not the theme. That's not the theme. It has nothing to do with what teachers do. It has to do with what he's doing. I mean, this is correct. This is technically correct. We should not compare you to your siblings. I should not compare the students that I've had with the students that are coming in that are related. Yeah, that is true, right? But it's not the theme of this. The theme of this has to do with, give yourself a little bit of credit. You are your own individual. So that's why this one's wrong. The next one, avoiding your problems is sometimes necessary to protect yourself from self-esteem. That's not the theme. This is happening. This is happening. This is happening in the story, but it doesn't mean that this is what the message is. This is not the learning lesson from the story. I'm sorry, I highlighted this. I don't know why I highlighted this. This is wrong. C. Authenticity and honesty are more valuable than in trying to meet others' expectations. Yes. Be honest with yourself. Be authentic. You're an individual. You are a human being that brings your own strengths to the world, right? This is the correct answer for that reason. And the last one, natural talent is more important than hard work. No, it doesn't say that. No, that's not what is the big message? Again, the theme is what is the big message that we're going to take out of this story? Let's look at number 5. Number 5, which detail from the text best supports your answer from part A? So here you have to find a detail that supports that authenticity, being authentic, being original. Which of these supports part four? Question four. Julian noticed immediately that nobody was painting masterpieces. Um, interesting. Let's come back to that one. Tara was waiting outside. So how bad was it? This one doesn't talk about how you should be authentic, right? How you should give yourself credit. Let's look at Dev could sketch anything. Portraits that look like photographs, landscapes that seem more to move, abstract. This one is only talking about what the brother could do. It doesn't talk about how you should be honest with yourself. And then D, your brother made beautiful things, but you're not your brother. You don't have to be. This is between, again, it's going to be between D and A. But A, there's something lacking here, right? It doesn't really talk about how you should be, how you are important in your own way, how you are not someone else. You're not a copy of someone. So I think for that reason, it's this one. This is the best option. I hope that these two make sense, right? Authenticity and honesty are more valuable than trying to meet others' expectations. And here it says, you're not your brother, right? Let's look at number 6. Which of the following best describes the role of dialogue? So dialogue has to do with people talking, right? What does dialogue do? How does dialogue play a role here? This goes back to narrative writing. Which of the following best describes the role of dialogue? Let's start from the bottom. Dialogue shows that all characters have the same opinion? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No, not everybody thinks the same thing about arts. Dialogue is mainly used for humor? It doesn't. There is no humor here. There is some humor, maybe. Actually, I don't think there's humor at all. Right? It's just, it advances the plots. It advances the plot, but it's not because of the humor. Dialogue primarily describes a physical setting? No, it doesn't. Dialogue doesn't really do that. Dialogue reveals Julian's internal conflict and helps show different character perspectives. This is the best option. Here we have what Julian's saying, what the cousin is saying, and what the teacher is saying. Right? And all those things combined shows that he is conflicted. He's having some issues with how he fits into this world. Verse 7. Which detail? So again, this is kind of like an inference. A lot of these are inferencing, and then this one is going to ask you to support this one. Okay, 7 is part B. Let's see. Inside class was already working. Does that show the internal conflict and the perspective of the characters? It doesn't. Actually, he said, surprised to find he meant it. It wasn't bad at all. This one could be an option. Let's keep looking. I guess it's about trying to be something you're not, about how the feels are jagged and wrong. You know he's going to catch you. So it's going to be between B and C, and I think it's this one. He really focuses on the issue and how he feels about the arts, right? This is when he does the clay piece. This one is probably the hardest question, because it really makes you think about what is the role of dialogue in here. Look at number 8. Which of the following explains how the author shows the feelings of different characters? So, how does the author show the feeling of the different characters? Let's start with the bottom. The author uses third-person limited point of view. The author uses third-person omniscient point of view. The author uses third-person limited point of view to focus on Julian, revealing his internal thoughts or showing the other characters' feelings. The answer is this one. I'm not going to focus too much on this one, but it is the author does show it's written from a third person, and Julian doesn't know everything in the story. So limited point of view means that he doesn't know everything. He doesn't know everything. Okay? It's not first person. So eliminate this one because it's not first person. It's not I. It's going to be B, C, or D. And because Julian does not know everything in the story, it's going to be limited. Okay? Let's go on to this one. Informational text. The Great Migration. America's Journey North. Between 1916 and 1970, so a period that lasted about 50 years, Approximately 6 million African Americans left the rural South and relocated to cities in the North, Midwest, and West. So if we look at U.S. map, look at U.S. map, the deep South is going to be this area here that I'm crossing out, like Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, South Carolina, Louisiana. Okay, that's the deep South. So they go north, they go to the Midwest, and they go west. Okay, they go this way. This mass movement, known as the Great Migration, fundamentally transformed American society, economy, and culture. It was one of the largest internal movements of people in human history. Yet many history textbooks dedicate only a few paragraphs to this pivotal event. Pivotal means super important because obviously it's a huge migration. So what this paragraph is saying is that these many people moved in the United States, and it's only given a couple paragraphs in history books, so it is not represented. It is not really thought about. The Great Migration occurred in two major waves. The first wave, in this case, wave means like time periods, in two major time periods. The first wave from 1916 to 1940 saw roughly 1.6 million African American leaves the South. So these are descendants of slaves. Roughly 1.6 million African Americans leave the South. The second wave from 1940 to 1970 involved about 4.4 million, so this is a much bigger movement. While the numbers are staggering, the reasons behind this exodus are equally important to understand. Exodus means exit. They left. So why did they leave? Push factors. Conditions that drove people away from the South. So push factors are things that push you away. For example, if you live in a country and there's a war and people leave, that means people are leaving because they're being pushed away because of the war. But let's see what the push factor was here. Push factors. Conditions that drove people away from the South were numerous and severe. The Jim Crow laws enforced strict racial segregation and denied African Americans basic civil rights. So these rights these laws, Jim Crow laws, were laws enforced after the Civil War to keep African Americans separated and discriminated against. Violence was common and often went unpunished. So these are things that these people are suffering from, so they feel like they have to leave. Between 1889 and 1918, more than 2,500 African Americans were lynched in the South, murdered. Economic opportunities were extremely limited, so they couldn't just really get a job. Most African Americans worked as sharecroppers. Sharecroppers are like farmers for big estates, trapped in a cycle of debt to white landowners. The boll weevil, oh, interesting, I never heard of that one. An insect that devastated cotton crops in the 1910s and 1920s made it an already difficult economic situation even worse. So these are the reasons why they leave, right? Pull factors. So pull factors are, for example, you find a job somewhere. There's better jobs in other places, or you have family in other places and you go to them, right? You're being pulled by that. So there's push and pull factors. Conditions that attracted people to the North offer hope for a better life. Northern factories needed workers, especially during World War I, when European immigration slowed dramatically and American men went overseas to fight. Industrial jobs are jobs like factory jobs. Industrial jobs pay significantly more than agricultural work in the South. So this is an important sentence. If you work in a factory, you're going to be making more than if you work in a farm. In 1917, a black worker in the South might earn $2.50 per day, while the same worker could earn $4.50 to $5 per day in northern factories. So if you're living here in the bottom, you're earning $2.50 a day, and people up here are earning $5 a day. So you're like, wait, I could just go here and make more money. Northern cities also offer better schools, the right to vote, and the possibility of living without the constant threat of racial violence. So these are other pull factors, right, that pull these African Americans to live in the north or somewhere away from the south because the south is dangerous. There's not enough jobs. You're discriminated against. Again, dangerous, not enough jobs, discriminated against. Here, you're still going to have some of those issues with discrimination. They're not going to go away. But at least you might be able to vote more. You might make more money, and there's less discrimination. Let's look at, okay. Oh my God, this is a long one. The journey and its impact. The migration itself was not easy. So migration and people moving. Families save, this is so annoying. Families save for months or years to afford train tickets. Train tickets north. Southern states, desperate to maintain their cheap labor force, sometimes made it illegal for labor agents from northern companies to recruit workers. So they're like, you can't be taking our workers. Some black travelers were arrested at train stations or forced off trains. Despite these obstacles, people persisted, often traveling at night and in secret. Upon arriving in northern cities like Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, and New York, migrants faced new challenges. Housing discrimination forced African Americans into overcrowded neighborhoods. So there's still discrimination, obviously. Job discrimination meant that despite their skills, many could only find work in the most dangerous or lowest paying positions. Race riots erupted in several cities as white residents, threatened by the newcomers' presence, responded with violence. The 1919 Red Summer saw riots in more than 3 dozen cities. However, the migrants also built thriving communities. Chicago's South Side, Harlem in New York City, and Detroit's Paradise Valley became centers of African American culture, business, and political power. The Harlem Renaissance, a flowering of African American arts, literature, and music in the 1920s and 30s, was a direct result of the Great Migration. Jazz music spread from New Orleans to Chicago and New York. Writers like Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston drew inspiration from the migration experience. The lasting legacy. The Great Migration permanently altered American demographic landscape. It changed where people live. In 1900, 9 out of the 10 African Americans lived in the South. So in 1900, 90% of blacks lived in the South. By 1970, less than half did. Cities that had tiny black populations in 1900 became majority black in 1970. The shift changed American politics, governments. As African Americans gained voting rights in the North, they became a powerful political force, pushing for civil rights legislation and social change. This is a really interesting one. The migration also strengthened connections between African Americans across the country. Families maintained ties to the South, to their southern roots, while building new lives in the North, creating networks that span regions. The collective experience of migration became part of our African American identity and memory. Today, some scholars refer to a reverse migration, interesting, or new Great Migration. As African Americans increasingly move back to the South, they're going back, attracted by lower cost of living, warmer weather, growing job markets, and the desire to reconnect with family roots. According to census data, between 1990 and 2010, the South gained more than 1.3 million black residents from the region. So we had this great migration that they left, and now it seems like they're going back. Their descendants are going back. The Great Migration demonstrates that ordinary people, through the individual decisions and collective action, can reshape a nation. As author Isabel Wilkinson wrote in her book, The Warmth of Other Suns, the story of the Great Migration is one of hope and determination, of people who dare to imagine a better life and had the courage to pursue it. So let's go over these questions. Number 9. Which evidence from the text best supports the inference that a journey north was dangerous for African Americans? So I think this is not even like a too difficult of a inference. So which of these supports the inference that the journey was difficult or dangerous? Sorry. Definitely not A. This does not show any difficulty. It just says that it happened. This one, between 1916 and 1970, approximately 6 million African Americans left the rural South. This one doesn't talk about that it was dangerous. Okay. Some black travelers were arrested. So this one is most likely, this is the best one, right? because it shows that it is dangerous. You could be arrested. Northern factories needed workers. This one doesn't talk about how. If it talked about how, no, it doesn't actually talk about the migration. It just talks about the jobs that they had. So the answer is C. Um, let's look at number 10. Which sentence from the text best summarizes the central idea? So, what is the central idea of this passage? Is it that they were arrested? That's a detail. Is it that there was discrimination? That's a detail. The central idea has to do with the migration, why they left, and why it happened. Um, Again, the central idea is never going to be a detail. Details are a combination. If you combine all the details, that's the central idea. Um, let's start from the bottom. Upon arriving in northern cities, this is not the central idea. This is just a small detail that they faced challenges once they got to the north. The central idea is that it did not happen in two great waves. That's a detail. Again, details are not central idea. Central idea is what is the big message in this passage. This is also a central. This is also a detail. It's just it's actually a small detail. The central idea is the Great Migration demonstrates that ordinary people, through individual decisions and collective action, can reshape a nation. Right? That is the big message in this. It's kind of like what is the big message? If you are telling someone what the passage was about, what is the big message that you can get out of this? It's not that. It's not this. You wouldn't tell them, oh, this is the big message, right? The bottom one, B. It's this one. Number 11. Read the sentence from the text. Between 1889 and 1918, more than 2,500 African Americans were lynched in the South. Economic opportunities were extremely limited. Most African Americans worked as sharecroppers, trapped in a cycle of debts to white landlords. What does the phrase trapped mean in this cycle? Trapped in a cycle of debt. What does this likely mean, this term? Trapped in a cycle of debts. So trap means you're stuck. Cycle means like a circle, you keep going. And debt means you owe someone money. You owe someone. So you're trapped in this like system of like you owe them money, you borrow money, you owe them money. Forced to borrow money from banks. I mean, some of you guys might pick this one, but this doesn't talk about the cycle. You have to focus on the cycle as well, like the circle. Encouraged to save, no. So there's going to be options that are just straight up wrong. Encouraged to save money. So this has nothing to do with being stuck. Requiring to pay taxes on their property. Most of them didn't own property. The only answer that makes sense is unable to escape owing money continuously. Like you constantly have to owe money. Right? You're trapped in this cycle of like owing money to people. 12. Which inference about the impact of the Great Migration is best supported by the text? So what is the big impact? What is the big impact? Here, they did talk about, look at this one. The Great Migration also strengthened connection between African Americans across the country. Families maintained ties to their southern roots while building new lives in the north, creating networks. So the impact, there's African Americans bring their culture to different parts of the country, right? So let's look at what the options are. Which inference about the impact of the Great Migration is best supported by the text? The Great Migration happened slowly to have any real impact? No, it doesn't. You can't support. No, that's actually really wrong. It had a huge impact. It didn't happen that slowly. The Great Migration only affected southern states? Absolutely not. It affected the northern and any place that the African Americans went, especially in the north with the Harlem Renaissance. The Great Migration had no lasting effect on American culture. That is very, very wrong, right? The Great Migration contributed to significant culture and political changes. So they got the right to votes, music. They talk about Lansing Hughes here somewhere. This one you'll have to go back to this part here. The Great Migration permanently altered American demographic landscape. In 1900, 9 out of 10 African Americans lived in the South. By 1970, less than half did. Cities that had tiny black populations became majority black. The shift changed American politics. As African Americans gained right to votes, they became powerful political forces. They talked about music here in this paragraph here. Okay, so that's why that's the best option. Um, the next one, 13. We're almost done, guys. Which detail from the text best supports your answer from part A? So this was part A. So here, the question was, what inference about the Great Migration is best supported by the text? The Great Migration contributed to significant cultural and political changes in America. Okay, so what evidence supports that? The Harlem Renaissance, yeah, this one, right? This supports that the Great Migration contributed to significant cultural and political changes in America. Now, this is talk about politics, not necessarily, but it does talk about the culture. So let's look at this one. Family safe for months. Nope. This doesn't talk about an impact of the Great Migration. The migration itself was not easy. It does not talk about the impact. This does not talk about the Great Migration. This is talking about how African Americans are now going back to the South. I hope that these two make sense. Okay. What is the impact of the Great Migration? This. And how do you know? Because in the text it says this. 14. How does the author structure information in the section why they left? So let's look at why they left. So why they left is this one. So push factors and pull factors. So things that are happening to them that are pushing them away, and how some places are pulling them in. So push and pull. So let's see what the options are for this one. By focusing on individual stories, no, there is no individual stories here. They don't talk about individual specific people. So that's wrong. By presenting events in chronological order, it doesn't really talk about chronological order. It doesn't. It focuses on push and pull factors. By comparing the experience of migrants it doesn't really compare their experiences. The only one that makes sense is this one. They talk about push and pull factors. And the last one. Which piece of evidence from the text most effectively supports the author's claim that the Great Migration was one of the largest internal movements of people in human history? So which of these pieces of evidence supports the author's claim that the Great Migration was one of the, that's the claim he makes, right? He makes a claim that this was one of the biggest movements of people in human history. And the evidence that best supports that is going to be actual data that talks about how many people actually moved. Okay, let's look at the other ones. Jazz, this has nothing to do with people moving or the number of people moving, how it's a huge number. This one doesn't talk about, it talks about the migration, but it doesn't talk about how big it is. This one, 1999, this one talks about how 90% of people lived in the South, but it doesn't actually talk about the movement of the people. Okay, I would like you guys to get 75% on this video. You will have quite a bit of practice. Next week, we're going to be working on argumentative essay that's going to be in the grade book as a essay assignment. It's going to be worth less than the interim, a lot less. So it's more practice, but it's still graded. Not as a homework assignment, but as a assessment assignment. But it's going to be worth less. Instead of being worth 10 points on the grade book, usually assessments are worth 10 points. It'll probably be worth like maybe 5 points or 2.5 points. It won't be worth as much. Okay. Again, you have practice on this. This video is due before you return on Monday. You're amazing. Keep it up.